We talked about the different methods to compliance. We talked about the prescriptive. We also talked about the mandatory requirements. But this is where we're referring to the way that we can use a REScheck approach, which is a web-based or desktop-based tool to help us meet or determine compliance by the total UA alternative. And it's the same as the U-factor approach, but allows for trade-offs across all envelope components. So in other words, if we have, let's say, a wall system that maybe isn't conducive to being prescriptive, we can use the UA compliance approach to make some basic trade-offs. REScheck is available for free. You can download it at www.energycodes.gov. Now, there's some basic steps to REScheck. Basically, you select the appropriate code, and you have a drop-down menu, and it allows you to go through and pick the code that you're in. This would be the 2009 IECC. You enter specific project information, you enter the building components, enter the mechanical equipment, and that's optional. Again, you can't have trade-offs for mechanical equipment. And then you view and print the compliance report, save the data file, and then of course it spits out a compliance certificate like this. Then it also prints a panel certificate, so that's something you could adhere to the electrical panel as required, as one of the mandatory measures. Now we have the simulated performance alternative, and this is where we call this the performance method. And this is where we use a base case and a compliance software tool to determine if we've complied or not. So we have a proposed design, and then that is compared to the standard design. And you input the proposed design into this computer program, and then it goes through and determines whether or not you comply. So the simulated performance requires approved computer software. The local code official can approve other tools. It also includes both envelope and orientation. So for example, you get credits for a proper orientation because a house that has a lot of west-facing glass uses a lot more cooling energy than one that faces south. It really allows the greatest flexibility. It provides credits such as for tight building envelope, for tight ducts. The ducts must be tested. Or even hydronic systems. Provides credits for exterior shading, as I said, favorable orientation, thermal mass, lower solar heat gain coefficient. So for example, you notice in that prescriptive chart in the code, there were no solar heat gain coefficient requirement for climate zone 4. But in the performance method, you get credit for that because, again, a lot of solar gains come through glass. So the performance method allows you to take advantage of low solar heat gain glass, like a lot of the popular low-E coatings. And Section 405 specifies the ground rules. These will generally be hidden in the compliance software in the calculation algorithm. So as I mentioned earlier, these software programs contain a lot of the rules embedded in their programming so that we don't really have to spend a lot of time worrying about that. And it's very similar ground rules to the rules that are used in the new home federal tax credits program and Energy Star home guidelines, very similar compliance tools. One of the interesting things about doing this simulated performance approach is that this analysis really takes a look at all the proposed R values and U factors. It gives you the most flexibility so that you can really fine-tune that building envelope to make it the most energy efficient and the most cost effective. It takes into account solar gain. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's not uncommon to see 40 to 45% of your design cooling load be solar gains through glass. And so with the performance approach, you can take advantage, as I mentioned earlier, about low solar heat gain coefficient glass, which is very popular these days with some of the low-E coatings. And it really doesn't affect your visible light transmission. It also allows you to fine-tune various duct and distribution efficiencies and get credit for that, as well as water heating. It also allows you to have a better control over your air infiltration numbers, and as well as take better credits for duct tightness orientation. But don't forget, the mandatory requirements are still necessary in sections 401, 402.4, 402.5, and 403. Mandatory requirements are required no matter what method of compliance you approach. It's also important to know that the code official has the final authority on the software, the worksheets, the above code programs, the electronic media that's used, the construction work for which the permit is required is subject to inspection, and a certificate is required on the electrical panel, just like with the other methods of compliance.
Now, here are some great state resources you can go to for more information. Kentucky Home Performance, which is located at www.kyhomeperformance.org. Kentucky Housing, which is located at www.kyhousing.org. Midwest Residential Energy Conference, which is located at www.midwesternenergyconference.com. Weatherization Assistance Program, which is located at www.kyhousing.org/development/single-family/pages/weatherization-assistance-program.aspx. And finally, the Residential Efficiency Training Center, located at www.kyhousing.org/resources/pages/ree-training-center.aspx.
Other resources are the Energy Codes program, and that's www.energycodes.gov, or you can go to tech support at becp@pnl.gov. An additional resource, in addition to the federal government resources and those resources that are at the state of Kentucky, there's also the ICC, the International Code Council. They have an online campus where they have education that's available on all these codes, similar to presentations like what you've seen here today. Also, it's important to note that there's a lot more increased federal funding towards energy codes, and that's because everybody's starting to recognize that this is good for the economy as well as the environment. Also, it's important to note that energy codes are a critical part of building design. Well, I'd like to thank you for viewing this presentation, and if you would like more information, you can contact the resources at the state of Kentucky. In addition to that, you can also contact the Building Codes Assistance Project, which is at www.bcap.ocean.org.